Hocho sampo pa gyu trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngo da pege drolor zambe zebra chen pande lame shabla solwa de Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Oma Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tudan Dagi Yi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Alo Makyuke Kudan Dagi Alo Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tudan Dagi Yi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Alo Shakya Munye Swaha Sashipuki Choshi Meto Tamare Ravalingshi Nide Gempadi Sangye Shintu Mikte Ulvarki Drokunam Da Shingla Chöpar Shoyidam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kam Niryatayami Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam Lai Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupar Shua Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupar Shua Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho.
In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. When we want to learn something new, or if we want to teach something to someone, I think that one of the greatest challenges is that because when we want to learn something, the only real resource we have is what we already know. And when we want to teach something to someone, the real resource that we have is what the other person already knows. Because if I try to teach you something using building blocks but building blocks that you don't have, concepts that you don't have, etc., I'll never be able. So the real challenge for ourselves, is how can I understand something new using what I already know? And this becomes particularly difficult when what we want to learn is something that goes out of our normal perception of reality. When we're talking about something that has to do with a different paradigm, because our concepts are made up of micro concepts, let's say. Let's imagine that when we have a thought, this thought is made up of different thoughts. Even as I'm talking, you're listening now, every word in itself is a concept. And putting these various concepts together, we get to a certain conclusion. And these concepts are made up of other things, because to understand certain concepts, those concepts, we need to explain other things. So these building blocks are concepts, these parts that make them up. Yesterday we said that nothing exists independently of its parts. Even a concept has different parts. And it's also for this reason that when we study, before going to university, you need to start at the grammar school until you get there, because we learn a little something here and something else there, and little by little we put it together until we get there. And the most tiresome, the difficult concepts are those that go beyond our normal perception of things. When they're concepts that require looking at concepts that we were already sure of. Because when we learn something, when we experience something, we live that thing as being the reality. And having to take a step back and reconstruct those concepts is not always so easy. And when we learn something that goes beyond the models that we're used to, with reference to reality, sometimes it seems very clear, but then at some point we lose that clarity, and one needs to go through that process again. And this is one of the reasons, in my opinion, why when we take texts that talk about the correct view of reality, tayata, it is so. This tayata, it's like this, is very easy. It's not that complicated. But the real difficulty is that it's totally different state than what you're used to, which is it's not conceptual. So we need to look at it from all angles, up, down, this side, apply that same concept in 1,000 different ways until at a certain point, okay, it's clear. I remember once there was a friend, after 4 years of study just about this, where he would study 12 hours a day, 11 months a year, dedicated only to this in 4 years. I asked him, what did you understand? He said, I understood a few things, but I didn't comprehend much. So it takes time. It's something that needs to be elaborated. It needs to be read again and again and again. I remember when I was reading about the 3 types of interdependence, which was the commentary of the 3 principal aspects of the path. This commentary of Pabonka Rinpoche of the text of Lama Tsongkhapa, and this text exists also in English. And I remember that I was reading it in Tibetan, and that part about the 3 types of interdependence, I read it maybe 15 times, and then at a certain point, something I've understood. And there are those moments where we perceive something, have more clarity. So we shouldn't worry if if it seems like we have clarity and then we lose that clarity. Some things are clear, some things aren't. It requires this familiarization. A way is a way of perceiving reality in a different way. Because in our ignorance, there are two types of ignorance. There's a constructed ignorance, a structured ignorance, and a spontaneous ignorance. The constructed ignorance is where we grasp to an autonomous, objective, independent reality. That would be this view of eternalism, and the one that so that constructed ignorance is based on culture, religion, philosophy, and in our worldview, within our more cultural way of seeing our cultural view, most of the time we fall into the trap of having an eternalistic view where we say the reality is like this, and we don't take into consideration interdependence or non-duality between object of perception and perceiver. We live in a dualistic world in this way. And then there's also a constructed view, which is nihilistic, where nothing exists. And then on the other side, we have a spontaneous view. It's our natural way of seeing things. When we experience anything, we experience it as if that thing, that situation existed in an independent, objective, autonomous, dual way. Are you following? And that's why, little by little, over time, we need to go back over these points, repeat them again and again and again, and little by little, we'll have more clarity. For example, in Buddhist teachings, Buddha talks about the 18 types of emptiness. There are much more, but he often 18 types of emptiness is recognized. In reality, emptiness is one, but the 18 forms of emptiness, we have the eight. It's the emptiness of 18 different types of objects, as if we said, okay, the emptiness of the bell, the emptiness of the book, emptiness of the dragon. Reality is divided into 18 categories, and then we see them one at a time, and we see that each category and all those types of objects lack inherent existence. If we were to summarize, first we start by seeing that all objects of perception, the world around us, what we observed yesterday mostly, they lack an autonomous, independent, objective existence because they're mutually dependent. They interact, and even between the object of perception and perceiver, they are mutually dependent. And here there's an important key, which is, how can I say? When I talk about the sound of the singing bowl, and I observe the sound of the singing bowl, and I try to analyze it, etc., etc., somewhere we try to look for something that has its own inherent existence. So we say the sound is there, and then we all live it in a different way. No. The sound that I'm talking about doesn't exist independently of me. The sound that each one of you make reference to doesn't exist independently of you. And my mind that perceives that sound doesn't exist independently from the sound, from the object itself. And here we're talking about the non-duality of the reality that we perceive, and I don't want to go back to everything that we saw yesterday. The second level, second point, is seeing that even ourselves, our identity, our being, lacks autonomous, independent, objective existence. And here, if we look, uh, it- we relate to ourselves through a generalized image. And here we could give an example that I've given many times, the story of the soup. But it really explains something, it shows something in this case. One day, I don't know why, but I created this idea that I didn't like soup. Even today, I'm not crazy for it. The situation's better, but anyway. So, soup for lunch, it's a little difficult. If it's there, if that's what's for lunch, that's what's for lunch. I eat it. But in Holland, what do they give you for lunch? Soup and sandwiches, basically. And it happened one day that I was at a conference and lunch, there was soup. Okay, I'm having my soup. And someone I know well said, Lama, how's your lunch? Obviously, I said, well, soup for lunch. Well, how do you want it to be? The strange thing is that my direct experience was pleasurable. I remember that the soup was good, the taste was good, the texture was good, the temperature was right. It was good. I can't say that it wasn't good. But when I finished my first bowl of soup, my first spontaneous thought was to want more soup. But what did I do? I know. Because I don't like soup. In other words, the idealized image that I had at that moment of myself um, was stronger than my direct experience of the moment. And throughout our lives, we develop, for different reasons, an idealized image of ourselves and of everything, and we label things. I am a lonely person, a joyous person, a sad person, like this, like that. We label ourselves according to what we think we are. Then, when we have experiences that are different from that label, then we say, well, there's something wrong because I am not this experience, I'm that. How is it possible that I am relaxed and joyous here by myself when I'm a lonely person and I suffer from solitude? How is it possible that I feel sad now? Because I'm never sad in a situation similar. In a similar situation, what happens is we create an idealized image of ourselves that we construct over time. This idealized image that we have is the sum of the experiences we've lived, the image of what we would have wanted to be, and our idea of what we think people would have wanted from us, and we mix it all up, and we come out with an image. We have an idealized image of what I think I am, what I should have been, what I should be according to my family, what I think I should be according to my career at work. And we see that if we take these contexts away, we don't know who we are. This can happen too. But if we analyze, we are nothing other than a constant flow of thoughts, feelings, sensations of our five aggregates. And this physical, in this physical moment, from our body, the sensations we experience, the discernment, the value that we attribute to things, the compositional factors, our our personality, attachment to satisfaction, to anger, faith, everything that comes together with that. And then our perception of our senses, the so-called consciousness. We are the constant flow of the whole of all of this. It's clear that if I take a photo of any minute, I'm going to see specific aspects, specific traits, and say, I am that. But if I take another photo after some time, I'm also that. But at the end, I'm neither the previous one or the one that came after. I'm this flow. I feel this, I feel that, I experience this, I experience that, I act like this, I act like that, but I am neither one nor the other. I am a name that I attribute to myself. We all have our own names, but this identity of self, I, is attributed onto the sum of these parts of the five aggregates. But if we look for ourselves, I mean, we look at ourselves, we don't exist in an intrinsic way. Our being in any moment of our existence depends on objects of perception, depends on objects of interaction, from our body, sensation, discernment, emotions. It's the whole of all of that. We depend on parts in the same way. So we looked at the lack of inherent existence of external reality, of ourselves. And on a deeper level, we should look at the interdependence and as a consequence, the lack of inherent existence of the mind itself. But what's difficult is that first of all, we need to be familiar with observing our own mind. I can't see the lack of inherent existence of something that I am not familiar with. So we talk about the Mahamudra, which is this whole process of realizing the lack of inherent existence of the mind. And deeper yet still, we see that the lack of inherent existence, does it exist? The autonomous objective existence, does it exist or not? Things things do not exist intrinsically. So this so-called emptiness exists, but emptiness, this lack of autonomous objective existence, is that also interdependent, or is it something solid? Also, this emptiness is also lacks inherent existence. So the deepest level is to observe the lack of inherent existence of emptiness itself. We're not going into details now, but there's a modern author who talks about this. If someone wants to look into this, there are very, very complex texts, and then there are others that are more simplistic. It was just to open this topic. There's an Italian author, Carlo Rovelli, and there's a book called Helgoland, with H. Helgoland. And in this book, there's a chapter that talks about Nagarjuna, and he's attributing to Nagarjuna the view of Buddha himself. And among the very beautiful things that he says one of the he talks about the view of Nagarjuna without saying about Buddhism. he says that it's possible to see that the lack of inherent existence, you can see through the view of Nagarjuna the emptiness of emptiness itself. All of this to say that it's not an immediate process where we understand and that's it. We need little by little deepen our understanding, go back, see it again, and start to perceive in our daily lives. And Lama Tsongkhapa said, first of all, it's important to connect to interdependence. The three principal acts, the three principal aspects of the path, Lama Tsongkhapa says, for this reason, because we need to realize the correct view of reality, first reflect and understand interdependence, understand how things are, tayata. To complete tayata, there are two main levels. The third level already gets into that first gate. The first three levels, when we learn reality. Here's a side note. Why are we talking about this now? We have two possibilities. One is to talk a little bit about how reality is and just leave it there and say that's the end of the teachings. It's Easter, or everything's fine, but life is life. We don't need to go on too much about it. And the other possibility is saying, okay, what is the path? At least begin to see a general view so you can start walking. How can we actually change our paradigm? What do we need to do? And that's what I wanted to enter. This path starts with Tayata, which is that first part of understanding. This part is made up of two wisdoms. The third wisdom is the first gate. There's the wisdom of listening, the wisdom of understanding, and then wisdom of meditation. Let's start from the first two. The wisdom of listening and wisdom of understanding. The process of listening to then understand is where, first of all, we acquire information. We read, we listen, we reflect on it, we talk about it, we discuss it. And in this process of acquiring information, little by little, there's a great clarity. When we complete this process, it's when we're sure about it, but we haven't understood completely why. It's a certainty, but it's not our own. It's something we're repeating that someone else said. If we use more technical terms, we would say when you develop a correct assumption and not yet a correct, valid inferential cognition. So what happens is, in this moment, we've said things exist in an interdependent way. They depend on causes and conditions, on their parts. They depend on the relationship between object of perception and perceiver, on the non-duality between them. We've talked about all this, but probably it's still something that's not one's own knowledge yet. When this perception seems coherent, seems like it's consistent, then one at that point, one has completed the process of the wisdom of listening with reference to correct view of reality. It's completed like this. First of all, let's use an analogy that was used by Geshe Yeshe Wanchuk. It was also a great master, a teacher also of Lama Ganchen. He wrote a book about this. He said, imagine that you need to catch a thief. And let's use the classic name of Devadatta, who was actually the cousin of Buddha. So in various in various texts, instead of saying John Smith, it'll say Devadatta. So let's say that Devadatta is the thief. The fact that I know Devadatta, does that mean that I know who the thief is? If I know Devadatta, does that mean I know who the thief is? What do I need to know who the thief is? I need to know the person, and I need to also put together the fact that that person has stolen, and at that point I can recognize the thief. The first phase is where I start to have doubts. I know Devadatta, but I think maybe Devadatta is stealing. I've seen some things, or I don't have any proof, but I have a small idea. And the second level is total certainty that Devadatta has stolen, and I actually have proof, but I haven't been able yet to catch him in the act. The third level is when I catch him in the act of stealing, and at that point I've completed that. And we can say the fourth level is when I'm sure that he won't steal in the future. This first part is when we look for this so-called object of negation. And here I need to take a step backwards. I didn't want to complicate too much, but I think I have to. So let's take a step backwards, and then we'll come back to Devadatta as the thief, etc. Our mind has a very important characteristic, that we are totally incapable of having two thoughts that are directly opposite at the same time. I'm not able to think I like water and I don't like water at the same time. Try it. It's not possible. I can have one thought right after the other, but not simultaneously. The only real way to eliminate a certain thought is to develop the direct opposite thought. I can have opposing thoughts, but not directly opposing. I can say I like this water even if it's too cold, even if whatever. But I'm not able to have the mind I like and I don't like simultaneously. The only way to eliminate a thought is to generate a directly opposing thought. What is the thought that we want to eliminate, that we want to change, that we talked about yesterday? The root of suffering, this ignorance, the ignorance understood as grasping at a solid, independent, objective reality that doesn't exist. It's this grasping at an independent, objective, intrinsic existence. That's is the basis for the development of selfishness, anger, jealousy, hatred, etc. That's what we want to eliminate, that basis. Ignorance is a mind that is ignorance an affirmation or a negation? Our ignorance is the mind that says sound, the sound of the singing bell exists independently as it appears to me, or is the mind that says the sound is not interdependent. It's an affirmation. It affirms something. So if I need to eliminate the mind that says the sound is of intrinsic existence, autonomous, independent, what's the directly opposing mode of apprehension? The sound is not. And here, let me just make a little drawing that I've used this example many times. I hope you can see it. I'll try to do it with thick lines.
Okay.
Okay. Can you see this? Are you able to see this more or less? It's not any kind of artwork, but you see that there are 4 parts. So we have a dot on the top, on the bottom, and 2 side parts. What we have is, so at the top, put anything like flower. So we have, at the top we have a flower. So we have the flower is, or exists, as it appears to me. How does it appear to me? As being of autonomous, independent, objective, intrinsically existent. So the flower exists, or is of intrinsic existence as it appears. This is ignorance. What is wisdom? The flower is not of intrinsic existence as it appears. So the affirmation and the negation, the basis is the same, the object is the same, but what changes is that one affirms and one negates. Ignorance affirms and wisdom negates. Are you following? So if I say instead, the flower is interdependent. It depends on causes and conditions. The flower exists in a state of non-duality between object of as being object of perception, and exists non-dually between object of perception and the perceiver. It opposes the mind that says it's intrinsically existent. It helps me understand, helps me get to the mind that says it's not intrinsically existent, but it doesn't resolve it. If my ignorance is the mind that grasps to an affirmation, what I need to block that mind is the mind that negates that same thing that was previously affirmed. And that's why, and it's from this necessity that this term emptiness arises. I think many of you have heard about shunyata, emptiness. Often it's given a mystic connotation, something important. From the sphere of emptiness, everything arises. There are moments where one says, what is this emptiness? Why do we need this emptiness? What function does it serve? The word emptiness is nothing other, is only to negate something. So if I take this drawing, I say the flower is empty of intrinsic existence as it appears. On the other side, I say the flower is of intrinsic existence as it appears. So when I say is empty, what I'm simply doing is negating something. So if it's empty, first of all, we assume that it exists, because if it doesn't exist, it can't lack anything. And if it is empty, it is empty of something. If I say this singing bowl is empty, it's empty of something. This is important because very often when we say all phenomena are empty, we can fall into the idea that nothing exists, that everything is an illusion, that reality doesn't exist. And over the centuries, many have fallen into this mistake. Reality exists, and it's because it exists, it can be empty of something. When we say it's empty of something. Now, there's a very, very important point coming. Are we doing all of this because we like it? Or because we want really to eliminate our ignorance and as a consequence our suffering? That should be the real reason, not to just philosophize. So what I want to understand, ignorance, this part here. Here I have ignorance, this affirmation. What does ignorance affirm? Our ignorance, what does it grasp to? To a generalized idea, concept, is our ignorance is there philosophizing, thinking, oh, it's like this, or is it something really spontaneous that grasps to an appearance, a spontaneous appearance? That it's the spontaneous appearance. And what do we want to negate? Intrinsic existence, generally speaking, or what appears to us as being intrinsically existence? When I talk about the flower, what do I need to negate? The generalized intrinsic existence of the flower, or the intrinsic existence of the appearance that I perceive? It's directly related to my perception. And here I can enter into a phrase that's very important by Shantideva, that says, Takpe, without entering into contact without the designated object, it's not possible to apprehend its non-existence. So you can repeat after Lama, without coming into contact with the designated object, you can't understand its non-existence. The example that I've given many times, for example, is there an elephant here? So the term by Shantideva, Takpe no la marikpa deyi nome zinma yin. Without entering in contact with the designated object, it's impossible to perceive its non-existence. So if I, as an example, is there an elephant here, a real living example, a real living elephant, not just a representation? No. Are you sure that? How can you be sure of the non-existence of an elephant here? What allows you to be that sure? Our ability to imagine how it would be if there were an elephant here. So without coming into object with the designated object, the designated object would be an elephant here in the room. I've seen elephants many times. I'm able to imagine more or less, how big an elephant is. I'm able to imagine an elephant here. So the designated object is an elephant here. So I come into contact with that designated object when I imagine it. And it's because I can imagine an elephant here, and I can look around, connect, make that comparison between what I imagine and what I actually perceive and come to the conclusion that there is no elephant here. If I asked you, is there a Shiluma here? Shiluma? Do you have a Shiluma in front of you? Yes? No? How do you know? How can you answer? How can you affirm or negate if you don't know what it is? Shiluma is cockroach in Tibetan. Shiluma is a really sweet sound. Cockroach is really quite rough. Anyway, what happens is to be able to affirm something or to negate something, first of all, I need to be able to know it, imagine it. So without coming into contact with the designated object, you can't apprehend its non-existence. So when I say the sound lacks intrinsic existence, to be able to understand this negation, what's the first thing that I need to be able to do? I need to imagine the sound as I need to be able to imagine the sound if it were of intrinsic existence. In other words, if we're not able, first of all, to look at ignorance in its face, we'll never be able to see and develop wisdom. And it's a personal process to be able to, little by little, one thing after the other, to observe our own experience of how reality, how everything appears to us as being objective, autonomous, independent. There's no hurry to negate the objective, autonomous, intrinsic existence. That negation should be a result, a natural result, not something forced. I need to be able to see how reality appears to me. And when I can see it clearly, I have my perception of how things are, and I put it together and I say, that's absurd. I can see how it's not. For example, let's say that for a long time, we went to go see a show. We used to go see a show, a dance performance that we really, really like. And we've been going to see this dance performance since we were children. We like it so much we take our children. We're fans of all the dancers and all the characters in this show. At a certain point, someone says, that show that you've gone to so many times is not real. It's just a project. There aren't people there. It's actually just a projection on a screen. Haven't you noticed that in 30 years they haven't gotten older? Oh, okay, I'm not so sure. Let me see. And then little by little you enter a process where you see that those characters are not actual people. So first of all, we need to use different reasonings, logical reasonings. We can say, oh no, I'm sure I've seen it so many times. How is it possible that you tell me it's not real, that they're not real? So I go to this show. Even if they say that they're not real people, how do they appear to me? They appear to me as being real people. And then I go and I follow the process that I see that they're not. I convince myself that they're not, and all of my reason, takes me to the conclusion that it is not real. That even if they seem like they're real people there in the show, they're not. It's a projection on a screen, and then I need to repeat that again and again. Oh, they appear as real people, but they're real people. They're not. I need to repeat that many, many times. And then one day, I don't convince myself of that, but I get close to the screen. And then I look behind the screen and I see the light of the projector. And from that moment, every time I sit in a seat and I look at the show, how does it appear to me? As people or light on a screen? Unfortunately, they still appear to me as people, but I'm sure I know that they're not. Also, us when we see when we look at a screen, a cell phone, a computer, a TV, or a movie screen, they appear to us as people. We develop fear and attachment, but but a fear of what? It's this light on a screen. Attachment for what? Even if we know that that is an illusory appearance, it appears to us still as being real until we get to a moment where it's only light on a screen. So the state at the beginning is where we need to be able to see the appearance, see how reality appears to us, how it appears to us in this autonomous way, starting from small things. Recently, I gave the example. Ask the person next to you, for example, can you see Lama? What would the answer be? Yes. And if you asked which one, what the answer would be, are you crazy? There's only one Lama there. What's important is that when I ask you, do you hear the sound? Do you see the flower? Wanting or not, in reality, what I'm asking you is can you hear the sound that I hear? Do you see the flower that I see? Do actually beyond that, what I'm saying is, do you see the flower that is reality, the reality that I perceive? Are you perceiving the same reality that I am? Because when I ask you, are you seeing the flower? What are we asking? Do you see the flower that I'm seeing, or are you saying this object that's made up of different parts and that the light reflects back from this object to my eyes and brings me to this conclusion that it's a flower? Are we asking all of that? Or when you ask, can you see Lama? Can you hear the singing bowl? Can you see the flower? Implicitly, what are we asking? We're asking if you see the reality that I see, because the reality that I see is the reality, the only way to see reality. And so it's important for us to see how reality appears as being autonomous of intrinsic existence, but it's when it's not. So the object of negation is the appearance of intrinsic existence, the appearance of independent, autonomous, objective existence. That appearance there is the one we need to negate. When we're able to understand that that appearance is not real, but we're not able yet to deconstruct it, we've reached this wisdom of listening. And there's a passage in the sutra, in the Heart Sutra that I was reading yesterday, that says, it's a verse from a sutra of Buddha. It was in this commentary. It says, simply doubting the intrinsic existence of an object, just doubting, generates more positive energy than making offerings, as many as all the grains of sand along the the banks of the Ganges River, making these offerings to all the Buddhas. Because when we doubt, not even have the certainty, but when we doubt the intrinsic existence, we're going against everything that we have ever known. Just to give you some courage. So the second level is when it's a certainty. When we don't have any more doubts. I don't have any more doubts. I know that it appears as being of intrinsic existence, but it's not, because it depends on causes and conditions. It depends on its own parts, because what I perceive is interdependent. This relationship between this non-dual relationship between object of perception and perceiver. This interdependence is incompatible with with any kind of intrinsic autonomous existence. When I'm able to interiorize this mechanism, then I've reached what's called the wisdom of understanding, of comprehension. And here we've completed the Tayata. Once I've reached that wisdom, I've really understood. We could say at this point, between understanding and realizing, there's an ocean between. Actually, we could say oceans. What happens? Once I've understood, now I need to interiorize, realize, bring that understanding from a conceptual level to a non-conceptual level, and really effectuate the change of paradigm. How can we do that? Through a process of familiarization. How do we familiarize ourselves with something? In just a few words, by repeating. I don't know. Let's take anything. Imagine anything. The cover of this text, for example. You're able to see it more or less, right? So now let's try to familiarize ourselves with this cover. Do you see it now? A little bit more. Now I take it away. I show you. I take it away. Instead, if you take it in your own hands and you keep your attention exclusively on it for 10, for 10 seconds, instead of, an hour of taking it and moving it, taking it away. So we need there with more concentration. 10 seconds is worth more. So to familiarize ourselves with the lack of inherent existence, we need to keep our mind still on this concept. So this first gate, the first going, is when we develop the state of single-pointed concentration called shamatha on the lack of intrinsic existence. So in few words, you can never meditate on emptiness in a general way. It's always the emptiness of something. So I take an object, the flower from before, for example. First of all, I reflect on the fact that the flower cannot be of intrinsic existence because it's interdependent. I follow an analytical process. And once I have concluded this analytical process, I keep that analysis aside, that the conclusion of the analysis. Then I go back to my breath and the present moment. I allow myself to see the flower, and I allow the appearance of intrinsic existence to arise, because I need to catch it. I need to catch ignorance. I need to create a secure environment where ignorance feels at home, and then it will arise. Because if I don't do this and I try to meditate on emptiness, going directly to the lack of inherent existence, my object of negation will not be my appearance, but it will be the generalized concept. And what I need to negate is not a generalized concept. It's the appearance of intrinsic existence. And to be able to negate it, I need to catch it. So I set that the analysis aside. I bring myself to the present moment. I observe the object. I allow spontaneously the object to appear to me, and as I see that it appears in an autonomous, objective way. I'm here, the flower is there. What do I have to do with the flower? And when that appearance arises clearly, and then I can really catch ignorance. And once I've caught ignorance, then I can apply the analysis that the conclusion from before. This flower that I call flower is nothing other than the sum of its parts, to which I attribute this name flower, etc., etc. And through this logical process, we are deconstructing this appearance of intrinsic existence. At that moment, then we stay on that single-pointedly, the mere lack of inherent existence, where there's no, not even the flower exists. Because when I deconstruct that, when I deconstruct the autonomous, solid characteristics of the object itself disappears. Because we're not, when we apply, when we're able to apply the non-existence of the non-inherent existence. For example, if I see the flower and I understand that object is an infinite number of possibilities, of which I choose one. But when I understand that that one is only one among many, and I try to see the infinitude, I can't see the flower anymore. There's like a short circuit. And in meditation, it's in that moment where one remains on the fact that it does not exist as it appears, that conclusion of non-inherent existence, and one remains single-pointedly on that conclusion, and that's called shamatha. That's the first gate, calm abiding. The second going is when, in meditation, together with the single-pointed concentration on the non-inherent existence of the object, a small part of the mind analyzes why it's not, analyzes the why it's not of inherent existence. And this is called vipassana, special insight. That's that second gate. One creates so much closeness with that lack of inherent existence that it becomes a non-conceptual experience. It's like, first I reflect the image that show, those aren't real people. It's just light projected on a screen. But then when I'm able to go behind the screen and see the lights, that's non-conceptual. It's a direct experience. That's the paragate. Parasamgate is we we familiarize ourselves with that non-conceptual experience again and again to gradually eliminate the appearance, because we're so used to seeing in that way that even once we've had a direct experience, it still appears to us as before. But when we're able to eliminate the appearance body, then we've realized our goal, enlightenment. What's important in all of this is that what's important here is to not get there, but to walk in the right direction. And what I see often is that we'd like to get to Bodhi tomorrow. I've understood Tayata, but I want to skip Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate. For us, if we could, the mantra would be Tayata Bodhisoha. But Buddha explained that Tayata Bodhisoha is not enough. In the middle we have Gate, and then there's the second Gate, and then you stay there a little bit more, and then we have Paragate. You stay there a long time, and then there's Parasamgate. You have to spend even more time there. If we needed to divide them up, the Gate and Gate to get to the Paragate is 1/3 of the path. 2/3 of the path is the Parasamgate, or rather, 1/3 of the path is bringing. Is taking from a conceptual level, Tayata. So from our starting point for the marathon is the Tayata. We're off. And 1/3 of the path is Gate Gate, which is to get to the Paragate, where we get beyond conceptual. Once we get there, it's 1/3 of the path, after which, to eliminate the appearance of intrinsic existence and go even farther beyond, Parasamgate, that's 2/3 of the path to get to the Bodhi. Okay. What's important is walking in the right direction. And the good news is, even if we're at the beginning of Tayata and not yet at the Gate, even a conceptual understanding where we start seeing reality in a coherent way helps us already live our lives with less suffering. It's said that merely doubting intrinsic existence is a slap in the face to ignorance. So having this view, and what's important is, yes, there is the view that we have. There's a different view, or the one that Buddha transmitted, and there is a path to follow to get there. It's possible, it's consistent, it's coherent, and we can walk this path. But the closest point to your starting point is where you are. So there's no hurry to get to the arrival point, but there is a great hurry to start start walking in the right direction. So I've given you a general idea of using the mantra Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Just one thing before we read the sutra, just to understand this better. Let's imagine Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha in relation to a diet, for example. So what is the Tayata relative to the diet? It's understanding it. First, they explain to me why I should eat this and why I shouldn't eat that, etc. After I've listened, I need to make that information my own, even if I'm not able to follow it perfectly. When I try to remember that I'm supposed to eat this and not eat that, as long as it's conceptual, I'm in the gate gate. When I'm able to interiorize that diet and it's part of my habits and I don't need to think about it much, what I should eat, what I shouldn't. I need to remember it a little bit, but it's more interiorized. I've gone beyond the concept. Then I've gotten to the paragate. But I still want to eat badly, let's say. Then I need to go back to respecting the diet again and again until I become one with the diet and I don't have to think about it anymore. And it's interesting, this tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate buddhi soha, this concept, actually, you can apply it to so many things. Obviously, in this case, we're talking about the path to enlightenment. But if we want to take this same process and apply it into many other things, it's possible. The comprehension of impermanence, the certainty of death, the importance of compassion, and a billion other things. This same path can be applied. So firstly, I understand it. Then I familiarize myself with it, initially conceptually, until I'm able to have a non-conceptual experience. I need to repeat that experience until I get to the point where I become one and inseparable with it. Okay? And so when we say tayata gate gate tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhisoha, so go beyond, go far beyond to enlightenment. May it be so. Now let's take the sutra. Let's start with the name. Chomden dema sherab ki paru tu chimpa nibo. If you see also in the translation, it says in Sanskrit, Bhagavati Prajnaparamita Ridraya. In Tibetan, Chondendema Sherabki Parotu Chimpe Nimpo. And in English, it is Bhagavati, the destroyer, the heart of far-reaching discriminating awareness, the vanquishing lady, surpassing all. This text makes reference, the title makes reference not to the text itself, but makes reference to the subject of the text. And what does this text talk about? Wisdom, or the perfection of wisdom, the paramita of wisdom, the change of paradigm, and the necessary process for the change of paradigm, the way we experience in reality. The paramita of wisdom, the paramita or perfection of wisdom. Paramita is that which takes us beyond, that which goes beyond. It's important of the concept of paramita is that it's something we all have, but we can develop it and better it. But we all have a starting point. We have this potential. Chomden Dema is interesting because it's said that the perfection of wisdom is the mother of all Buddhas, and this term is used. It's called Chomdende Ma. Ma means mother. Chomdende means two things. He or she who has destroyed, who has vanquished. Chomdende, vanquished what? Ignorance, suffering. Chomdende, that second de, means to go beyond. So it means having eliminated completely ignorance and the mental defilements and have gone beyond suffering. And this is the mother of this. So it makes reference to wisdom who has gone beyond the suffering of ignorance. So we're talking about the wisdom of a Buddha. At the same time, we're also talking about that which allows to go beyond. So who is the vanquishing one that allows us to go beyond suffering and ignorance? Wisdom that realizes the ultimate nature of all things. Why mother? And there are different ways to see it. One, it's said that it's the mother because any being up to today that was able to reach Buddhahood, what allowed that to happen is wisdom. So wisdom of the correct reality is what gives life to to Buddhahood. So it's the mother of all Buddhas who gives the possibility to reach Buddhahood. It's wisdom, and that's why it's also called the mother. Another aspect is that when we talk about method and wisdom, because wisdom alone is not enough, method is the part of compassion and love and generosity, etc. It's divided. The part of wisdom is connected to female and method to male energy. So here we have Chondendema, because wisdom has a direct relationship with the feminine energy, which has nothing to do with men or women. We all have female and male energies. So our title says we're here to talk about the mother of all Buddhas, wisdom that has arrived beyond suffering, and also the same one who takes us beyond suffering. And this, from that first word, Chomdendema, Bhagavati, I don't know how to really translate this one word that can say all of that. That's why it's generally called the Heart Sutra. Chomdendema, Sherabki Parotu Chimpe Nim is essence, Nim is heart, Ningpo is essence. So it's the essence of the wisdom, the essence of the perfection of wisdom, the mother, the vanquishing lady that has gone beyond Bhagavati. So from the title, what do we see? What does this sutra talk about? It talks about the essence of what wisdom is, correct, the paramita of wisdom, of the correct view of reality, and also about the process of going beyond. Paramita, you can read it in two different ways, of having gone beyond and the going beyond. So the sutra talks about the wisdom that has gone beyond and how to go beyond. Beyond what? Ignorance and suffering. Okay? But it's the essence. Because these same teachings and the other sutras names, it's always the perfection of wisdom. What changes is whether it's 20,000, 10,000, 8,000 verses, and then here in the essential mode, and then there's one that's a little bit longer called the Sutra of the Dorje Chupa, the Diamond Cutter Sutra, which is a little bit longer than the Heart Sutra, not that much longer, but a little bit. But this is known as the Sutra of the essence of the perfection of wisdom. So let's begin.
Yang te tse janju semba semba chimbo baba chere se wanjo ki shirage paro tu jin chirage paro tu jimba samo cheba nila nambar tashi pumbo ngabo deda kyaran shingi tomba nambar taos tene sange ki tu tina nemba sharipu janju semba semba chimbo baba shirage wan baba chere zi wanjo la dike che me so rigi puam rigi pumo kana la shirage paro tu jimba samo cheba deba te jidar labar cha teke che me badan janju semba semba chimbo baba chere se wanjo ki
This part is where we give context to the sutra. So, these words have I heard. These words have I heard makes reference to, it's how all sutras begin, as we saw yesterday, that all sutras were oral. And so the one who would tell this tell the sutra would begin with these words, have I heard. At one time, the vanquishing master, surpassing all, the Buddha, was dwelling at Vulture's Peak mountain by the royal city of Rajgirha, which is near Bodh Gaya. It's a very famous place where Buddha taught the Heart Sutra. No, that's wrong. It's not where Buddha taught the Heart Sutra. It's the where, for a very long period, transmitted the perfection of wisdom. So both all the sutras of 100 even the longer sutras, they were all given in this place. And from my understanding, these teachings were then written down in very detailed way. 100,000 verses, 20,000 verses, 10,000 verses, etc. And then after he had given, and then here in this context, here we have Avalokitesvara. They make a summary of these teachings, the perfection of wisdom. So here he in this place gave these transmissions, these teachings, and then they were written down. They became the sutras of varying lengths. So, by the royal city of Rajgirha, together with a great assembly of a monastic sangha and a great assembly of the Bodhisattva sangha. So, monastic sangha and the Bodhisattva sangha. The Bodhisattva sangha are the lay sangha, and of the monastic sangha, they're perhaps also bodhisattvas. When we take the other sutras, it's really nice that when Buddha he transmitted the great wisdom, there was an enormous number of all kinds of beings, not only his human disciples. That's why also at the beginning when we shared the Dharma, you see at the beginning when I make this mudra of the turning the Dharma wheel, I recite, and the meaning is, in the language of the gods, in the language of the asuras and the nagas and the humans, I share the Dharma according to the language of everyone. Because it said that when Buddha taught, he would speak in one language, but everyone was able to listen in their own. It's a very it's like our translation system of today of simultaneous translation. But not just in a human language, but in the language of all beings. It's said that there were many beings also without a physical body, nagas, asuras, just thousands and thousands of beings. So in that occasion, at that time, the vanquishing master surpassing all was totally absorbed in the absorbed concentration that expresses the multiplicity of phenomena known as the appearance of the profound. So imagine that Buddha was there with his many disciples and he was seated in meditation. And he was in this meditative state. And in simple words, he was perceiving the nature of all things. And Buddha was in that meditative state. At the same time, also at that time, the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Arya Avalokitesvara, so the Bodhisattva, he or she who wants to reach enlightenment, the Mahasattva, to help all beings, the great-minded being, Mahasattva, the Arya, who's already realized emptiness, has already gotten out of samsara, has already realized so Avalokitesvara is the name of Buddha's disciple, which means he who has an eye for all, for every being, is always caring for all beings. So Avalokitesvara, the powerful Lord, beholding all around, conducting his behavior in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness. So he was there reflecting on what Buddha had taught regarding the emptiness, that all phenomena lack inherent existence. And he sees also the 5 aggregate factors of his experience as being devoid of self-establishing nature. So he sees that his body doesn't exist in an autonomous, independent way, objective way, because it's interdependent. The sensations don't exist objectively. Discernment doesn't exist in an independent, objective way. One's own personality and all the shades of one personality do not exist in a solid way in one's own consciousness. This flow of thoughts that perceive the objects of the senses, they don't exist. The consciousness doesn't exist in a solid way. He was reflecting on all of this. Then, through the might of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra, which means the son of Shari, addressed these words to the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Arya Avalokitesvara. So let's imagine Buddha is there in meditation with many disciples around. I've been there a couple of times. I have the image of that place. Buddha was there, seated in meditation. Avalokitesvara was on one side. Shariputra was on somewhere there too. And Avalokitesvara was meditating on how all these 5 aggregates, they don't exist as they appear, these heaps, as we talked about yesterday. And as he was thinking about this, through the power of the Buddha, the presence of the Buddha influenced Shariputra to ask a question, because the Heart Sutra, it says that it's Buddha's sutra, but the only words that Buddha says actually is excellent, excellent. It's like this. So when we see the types of sutras of Buddhas, there's the Chingilabhika. These are the sutras that were created through, thanks to the blessings. The words were not Buddha's words, even if they make reference to Buddha's teachings. But it's through the power of Buddha, through the presence, the influence of Buddha, his blessings, the Venerable Shariputra then says to Avalokitesvara, how Shariputra says to Avalokitesvara, how does any spiritual child with the Buddha family traits need to train who wishes to conduct his or her behavior in profound and far-reaching, discriminating awareness? Here, there's a little bit of discussion about the original translation, but the version in Tibetan is one of the only place where the original has two different versions. One says, here it says, how does any spiritual daughter or son or daughter? In the question, this is a question of translation, maybe in the Latin languages, that child can be masculine only as son, but in English we have child. But when he makes reference with the question being, how does any spiritual child, he's talking about himself, how does one need to train? He's using himself as a reference, and that's why he says son, but it's generalized for everyone. So we can use, and there are many commentaries, the question is also in reference to everyone. So how does any spiritual son, or how does any spiritual child, even in Tibetan it says Riki Riki Buam Riki Bumo, so daughter, son and daughter. It doesn't change much, but the main question, let's remember that this sutra doesn't talk about the Tayata, what emptiness is. It says, okay, Buddha explained the correct view of reality in detail, and how does one realize it? So the question that Shariputra asks is, how does any spiritual child of the lineage, the Rik means family, so it's a son or daughter of the family, or of the lineage, he or she who wants to get out of samsara, who wants to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, both getting out of samsara and becoming a Buddha for the benefit of beings. So here, with the reference of son or daughter or child from the lineage or from the Buddha's family, he who desires deeply to get out of samsara for the benefit of all beings. So it's who, in other words, we've understood the paradigm that Buddha has transmitted, but he who really wants to get out of samsara, who wants to reach Buddhahood and wants to train himself into changing his paradigm, what does he need to do? This is the question that Shariputra is asking. Addressed like that, the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Arya Avalokitesvara, addressed these words to the Venerable son of Sharadvati. And here we see that the sutra is divided into moments where Avalokitesvara addressed to Shariputra and saying his name. And if we mark, if I remember well, there should be 4 times, O Shariputra. Let's start with one here. O Shariputra, any spiritual son with the family traits or spiritual daughter with the family traits. Oh, and then we have a second one under similarly Shariputra. And then we have it because like that Shariputra. And then the next page. And then we see again on page 9 Shariputra. Are you able to find these four passages 4 times Shariputra? They're important because every time that Avalokitesvara says Shariputra, we're dividing up the mantra Gate Gate. The first time that he says Shariputra is Gate Gate. The second one is Paragate. The third that he says Shariputra is the Parasamgate, and the fourth is the Bodhi. And if we use more specific terms, the first time where he talks to Shariputra it talks about how to practice to practice on a conceptual level and that is the path of accumulation, and then it's how to do it on a non-conceptual level. Sorry, it's on the path of accumulation, and then the path of seeing, and then the third one is the path of meditation, and the fourth time he explains the path of no more learning, enlightenment. So we can divide this into these 4 main parts. The first part is where we give context, where they were, who asked the question, through the influence of the Buddha, and what state one was in, reflecting on the lack of intrinsic existence of the 5 aggregates, and through the power of the Buddha, Shariputra asked the question, any spiritual child of Buddha, how does one need to train to perfect and develop wisdom that understands the ultimate nature of everything? So let's remember that the sutra is not here to explain what the ultimate nature is, but how to realize it. So let's go to the first Shariputra. Let me read the Tibetan first. Okay, at this point, the Tayata and the first 2 gates are explained. O Shariputra, any spiritual son with the family traits or spiritual daughter with the family traits who wishes to conduct his or her behavior in the profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness needs to behold all around in detail like this. He or she needs to keep in view fully and in detail. So first of all, it needs to have the correct perception, and once he's gotten to the conclusion, needs to repeat that conclusion and repeatedly. He or she needs to keep in full view and in detail the 5 aggregate factors of his or her experience, and those as devoid of self-establishing nature. So needs to see the 5 aggregates as being empty of intrinsic existence, and this is the Tayata. He's explaining that he's talking about the being, self, one's own body, one's own mind, in every aspect of the being that lacks an autonomous existence. So he needs to keep in view fully and in detail the 5 aggregate natures. Also, it says also the 5 aggregates, because it's not just the self, it's all phenomenon. And the path of reaching enlightenment, in that initial phase of listening and understanding, it's easier to understand inherent existence by observing external reality. It's easier to understand the lack of inherent existence and the ultimate nature of reality by looking at external objects. But the moment that we meditate on the ultimate nature, the lack of inherent existence, it's easier if we use ourselves as an example. So the path that's explained is that first we observe external reality, and then in the phase of actually meditating, where we deconstruct, we start with ourselves. Why? Because it's easier somehow. I say somehow because it's not that obvious. To observe the appearance of it's easier to see the lack of inherent existence. It's easier to catch the ignorance that grasps at the appearance of inherent existence of self. So it says all phenomena lack inherent existence, and we've talked about this. Avalokitesvara says to Shariputra, we've talked about this before. So he should see and repeat that even the self, the 5 aggregates, the 5 aggregate factors, are devoid of self-establishing nature. Rang Xing Tongpa means empty of an objective, intrinsic nature as it appears to us. And then after this, he makes reference to the four profound aspects of emptiness. Says form is empty. Sung Tongpao. And this is one of the most well-known phrases from the sutra, where form, voidness, form. So form not separate from voidness not separate from form. What has form? That has voidness. What has voidness? That has form. Let's explain. So Sun Tongpao. So what does form make reference to? To the body. We're talking about our 5 aggregates. So first let's read the text a little bit. It says form is empty. So the aggregate of form is empty. Emptiness is form. So form is not separate from voidness. Voidness is not separate from form. At the same time, they are feeling, distinguishing, affecting variables, types of consciousness are empty, voidness. If we were to take the longer version of the sutra, we would say form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not other than voidness. Voidness is not separate from form. So feeling is voidness. So, and in the same way, it's valid for the other aggregates. We understand the first one, and then we can apply it to the others. But you can extend to each of the 4. The feeling is voidness. There's a voidness and feeling, etc. Now let's talk about the flower. This flower. What is this flower? The flower is a name, a concept, because I'm sure that if if I put an ant here on top, the ant wouldn't call it flower. It would have a totally different perception. Here, what I have in front of me, we call it a flower. It's a concept that has been attributed to the whole of many parts. But it's here. I can touch it. I can interact with it. Reality exists. But this flower exists as it appears because it interacts with everything else. It depends on its causes and conditions. The flower doesn't exist independently from the value that I attribute it to it as observer. So this flower is empty of inherent existence, isn't it? Yes. So the flower is empty. But the lack of inherent existence of the flower, does that exist? Does that exist independently of the flower? Let me give you another example. If I say the flower is empty of inherent existence, and I say that the flower exists in an interdependent way, am I saying the same thing in different ways? Actually, yes. So what happens is the flower is empty. The flower is empty because it lacks inherent existence. Remember, when I say empty, it's empty, it lacks something. What does it lack? What is it empty of? It lacks an inherent existence as it appears. The flower is empty. But this emptiness and of the flower, the emptiness of the flower doesn't exist. It doesn't exist independently from the flower that exists independently. So emptiness and so the flower exists as a flower in an interdependent way. And because it is interdependent, that the lack of intrinsic existence of the flower exists. If the flower was, if the lack of inherent existence, if the lack of inherent existence of the flower didn't exist, then the flower couldn't exist because there's no such thing as an intrinsically existing flower. So we're simply we're using different words when we say the lack of inherent existence of something and its interdependence. We use the terms absolute and relative reality. The relative reality is the flower. That's a flower that depends on causes and conditions. It's a flower because I call it flower, etc., etc. That's its relative reality. It exists. It's relative because it depends on causes and conditions, the observer, its parts, etc. It's relative because everyone who perceives it appears it in a different way. But this doesn't take away the fact that it exists. It exists relatively, but it exists. And because that it has its relative existence doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It exists relatively, but not in an intrinsic way. So it exists on a relative level, right? What's the relative reality of what is the relative reality of the flower? That it exists as a flower, that it appears differently to everyone, that it depends on causes and conditions, on the duality of the object itself and he who perceives it. What's the absolute reality of the flower? It would be something that whoever sees it in the same way. It's something that is the same for everything. The lack of autonomous, independent, objective, intrinsic existence of the flower, is it different from the lack of intrinsic existence of the singing bowl, or they both the lack of intrinsic existence? They're the same. Anything that exists lacks intrinsic existence, and anyone who looks at it correctly will see this lack of intrinsic existence. And let's set aside, the how emptiness lacks some inherent existence. But what is the absolute reality of the flower? That the flower lacks intrinsic existence. If we let's say the same thing in other words, the flower appears to us as being relative or absolute. It appears to us as being absolute. In other terms, does it appear to us as being objective or subjective? It appears to us objectively as being objective, when instead it's subjective. What's the only real objective reality of the flower is that it lacks an objective reality because it's subjective. In other words, what's the absolute reality of the flower? That the flower lacks absolute lacks an absolute reality. That's its absolute reality. Seems like a play on words, but it's not. The flower is empty, so the flower lacks inherent existence. The emptiness of the flower is also the flower. Emptiness is form, form is vactiness. Absolute reality and relative reality are two ways of seeing the same thing. The lack of inherent existence of the flower, the emptiness of the flower, and is what allows the flower to exist as a flower. Because if it weren't empty of intrinsic existence, then it couldn't exist, because then it wouldn't interact with anything. It would be the same for everyone. Does a flower like that exist? No. So if it weren't empty of intrinsic existence, then it couldn't exist as a flower. And if it didn't exist as a flower, as being interdependent, then it couldn't be empty of intrinsic existence either. So when I say form is emptiness and emptiness is form, I'm showing that they're two sides of the same coin. They're two different ways of seeing the same reality. Form is nothing other than emptiness. Emptiness is nothing other than form. In other words, relative reality and absolute reality are two ways of seeing the same thing. We make this distinction because in our ignorance, reality appears to us as being solid and absolute. Let me try to explain in a different way. If reality didn't appear to us as being objective, we wouldn't need to make a distinction between subjective and objective. Simply, it would just exist, and that's it. The reason why we need to say no, reality is subjective, is because it appears to us as being objective. The only reason why we need to say no, reality is relative, is because it appears to us as being absolute. Right? So this distinction between absolute and relative as being separate things is a manifestation of our own ignorance. What is the absolute nature of the flower? That the flower doesn't exist in an absolute way. Okay? Because it's relative, and if it's relative, then it can't be absolute, and its absolute level is that it doesn't exist in an absolute way because it's relative. And what does this bring us? That reality exists. Reality is solid in the sense that it's interdependent, that it exists interdependently, and it doesn't exist in an objective way, like as we've said in 1,000 different ways. But that lack that exists is called emptiness. That negation, that perception of the lack of that autonomous, intrinsic, independent existence is necessary because in our ignorance we think that we think it's there. We need to affirm its negation or negate its affirmation. It's the same thing. So when I say form is empty, the body lacks intrinsic existence, and the emptiness is form, and form is nothing other than emptiness, voidness, and voidness is form. So the body, an interdependent reality, lacks intrinsic existence, and this lack of intrinsic existence of the body exists because the interdependent body exists. So the emptiness of the body and the body as an interdependently existing entity, they exist independence on each other. One can't exist without the other. So if it didn't exist in an interdependent way, it couldn't exist the lack of intrinsic existence couldn't exist. So why do we need to make all these distinctions? Why do we need to make this distinction? Because our natural, spontaneous way of seeing things, we have this tendency of separating things, and we need to realize this one thing. Sometimes, we hear people say, because on the absolute level it's different, and I think maybe you've heard on an absolute level we're all together, or I don't know what the people are talking about when they say on the absolute level. The point is here that the ultimate level of existence of everything is the lack of intrinsic existence. And why? Because it exists in an interdependent way, because it exists in a relative way. So the relative and the absolute, that's simply the negation and the affirmation of the same object. I say it's interdependent, and I say it doesn't exist in an intrinsic way. But actually, I'm talking about the same thing, saying the same thing. So here, Avalokitesvara says to Shariputra, he or she needs to keep in view fully and in detail the 5 aggregate factors of his or her experience and those devoid of self-establishing nature. Form, voidness, voidness, form, form not separate from voidness, voidness not separate from form. Similarly, feeling, distinguishing, affecting variables, types of consciousness, voidness. So our sensations are empty of intrinsic existence. They're inseparable from feeling itself. So if we were to read it more extensively, here where it says feeling is empty, we'd say that feeling is empty and is nothing other than emptiness. So distinguishing or discernment. So distinguishing is empty. And emptiness is what's beautiful here is that when we talk about emptiness, we're not running away from reality. Reality exists, and actually it's said that the more I meditate, the more I reflect on the lack of intrinsic existence, on emptiness, and the further away I get to the law of cause and effect and interdependence, the more I feel separate from the world, it means that I'm following a wrong path. The more I meditate instead on emptiness, on interdependence, and the more I feel that I live in an interdependent way, um, um, and I connect to this interdependent world and give even more value to every experience and every phenomenon, that means that I'm going in the right direction with my meditation, because there is this tendency to talk about emptiness and fall into nihilism, and this is what we need to avoid. So in this first moment, Avalokitesvara explains to Shariputra on a conceptual level, you need to reflect correctly and repeatedly. Enter into meditation. Take an object. First you do it with form, and then with feeling, and then with discernment, and then the affecting variables, or the parts of your personality and the types of consciousness. Look, see how the body and the feeling and emotions and discernment and consciousness, the mind, how it appears to you as being of intrinsic existence, and deconstruct that appearance and see that lack of intrinsic existence exists because the feeling exists, and the feeling exists because it is empty, for example. Otherwise, we have this tendency, oh, but feeling doesn't exist. It lacks inherent existence, as if it didn't exist. No, feeling, sensation, this factor, it exists as being interdependent. It's empty of intrinsic existence. So what's the first gate? Conceptually, we need to understand that each one of our parts of our being and our being all as a whole reflects. We need to understand and repeat this understanding again and again through meditation. What? That it lacks intrinsic existence. That lack of intrinsic existence exists in a direct dependence on that lack exists given because the phenomenon itself exists. I'll just take let me just take this commentary, and just to make sure that I don't skip anything that I had marked.
군소 레니 다데 바드나노 군소 데니 도니
For each one of these points, we could deepen a lot, but it's not the time to do so. What's important for us here is to understand that absolute and relative are the same. There's just two different ways of seeing the same thing. So interdependence and lack of inherent existence are two ways of seeing the same thing. So when I say that the flower lacks inherent existence because it's interdependent, why is it interdependent? Because it lacks inherent existence. And if it wasn't in one way, it couldn't be in the other, and vice versa. Okay? So let's go forward. And this makes reference to the to the path of accumulation and preparation. Here, when he says that you should um, experience you should experience again and again, clearly and again. Take each one gradually, repeat, see how it appears as being of inherent existence, deconstruct that appearance in meditation, and making reference specifically to shamatha, vipassana. Because if I don't remain single pointedly focused in medication, that example that I gave at the beginning, for example, of this booklet, if I'm able to stay focused on that exclusively, then my understanding, my memory of the object is better. If I just take it, do it sometimes, take it away, then it's all quite blurry. When I talk about the lack of inherent existence of the body, for example, it's a concept there in the air. First, I need to be able to see that appearance of intrinsic existence, and then I deconstruct it. And what is a sign that I'm able really to see the appearance of my aggregates, and a sign that I'm able really to deconstruct it. A sign of this deconstructing of inherent existence is fear. One disciple of Lama Tsongkhapa, actually, what was his name? Jetsun Sherab Sengye, at a certain point when Lama Tsongkhapa was giving teachings on this specific subject, on the lack of inherent existence of the self, at a certain point he starts touching himself and holding on to his robes, and he was sweating, and it said that Lama Tsongkhapa looked at him and started laughing. Oh, look, Jetsun Serab Sengye is afraid of not existing. He was touching himself physically, grasping at himself. Like, do I exist really or not? And one way to see the level of to see if one is actually realizing it is to see the level also of fear that one feels. At the beginning, it's maybe a lot of fear, and then it diminishes. Imagine we have a way of perceiving everything, and then at a certain point, that reality doesn't exist. It can bring about a sense of fear, because our idea of non-fear is about having control over things, that we are sure, that we can also foresee things. If at a certain point I understand that what I perceive is not real, but I'm not able yet to perceive what is real, there's a panic. Because what is the object of perception that we're in most contact with? Ourselves. And if there's something for ourselves that exists, is ourselves. I mean, I can doubt everything but not myself. But if at a certain point I start reflecting and observing, and I go beyond these mental games, and I see that everything, that what I called myself doesn't exist, which doesn't mean that I don't exist, but I need to deconstruct that, self, that solid self, to be able to see its interdependence. At the beginning, we lose our foundation. When we allow ourselves at the beginning to see how I appear to myself as being of autonomous existence and I deconstruct that, there's a moment where it's not conceptual. One feels a kind of lacking, a voidness. And theoretically, one should allow oneself to experience that voidness. Turn off the lights, and you stay in that meditative state where there is only that voidness. Because when we deconstruct that that when we deconstruct that appearance of intrinsic existence. Once we deconstruct that, we're not able to see ourselves. And here's the next part of the sutra. It says, similarly, it says, similarly, no defining characteristics, no arising, no stopping, no being stained, no being parted from stain, no being deficient, no being additional. Because it's like that, Shariputra, in voidness, no form, no feeling, no distinction, no affecting variables, no kind of consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no physical sensation, no phenomena, no cognitive source that's an eye, up to no cognitive source that's a mind, no cognitive source that's phenomenon, no cognitive source that's mental consciousness, no unawareness, no elimination of unawareness, up to no aging and death, no elimination of aging and death. Likewise, no suffering, cause, suffering, and pathway mind, no deep awareness, no attainment, no non-attainment. What does this mean? What does this mean? Just a minute. Okay. If someone is able to perceive the lack of intrinsic existence of one phenomenon and then looks at another next to it, says, okay, that also appears as being of intrinsic existence, but if this one isn't, then that one it lacks intrinsic existence also. What happens is this next part, it talks about entering into the non-conceptual experience, where it says, so all phenomena are of the nature of voidness. Shariputra, with all phenomena. It's like that, Shariputra, with all phenomena, voidness. And here talks about what is called the 8 deep characteristics. So they're all phenomena are empty. They no defining characteristics, no arising, no stopping, no being stained, no being parted from stain, no being deficient, and no being additional. There's one missing. Let's see. Let me see in Tibetan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, here's 8. There are 8. Yeah, there are 8. The fact that we're seeing all phenomenon as lacking intrinsic existence, not just the body. When we say that all phenomenon lack intrinsic existence, there are these 8 categories. So first of all, we see
prima di tutto tutti i fenomeni
First of all phenomena lack intrinsic existence and therefore their emptiness. That's the first. The second, their lack characteristics, no defining characteristics. This means that they don't have any intrinsic characteristics. They have interdependent characteristics. So they're even the fact that they are interdependent, or in the fact that they are impermanent, or that they burn, or that they make wet, they exist as characteristics as being interdependent. So even characteristics lack inherent existence. So they have no defining characteristics intrinsically. They're not produced, no arising. What does that mean? Reality that we perceive. Is there a moment when things begin? Is there birth? Is there cessation? We see the flower. Is there the moment that the flower starts and then dies? A person is born and then dies. This beginning and this end, does this exist objectively, or does it exist exclusively in an interdependent way? So all phenomena are not produced intrinsically, and there's no stopping, there's no sensation intrinsically. Makepa and Magagpa.
langche trima dan trawa nyangele debe tarpa yang rangsing meto chebe number tabe tenima. Okay.
So they're not produced and they don't cease. They're no being stained and not being parted from stained. They're not. This makes reference to the all contaminated. It would be more. What are phenomena that are contaminated? Contaminated by ignorance and jealousy, everything connected to samsara, let's say, are mental defilements. So anything contaminated, anything contaminated by this filter of mental defilements. Everything that has to do with suffering and samsara doesn't exist intrinsically. So contaminated phenomenon, they are not. And even all the qualities of a Buddha, so no being parted from stain, do not exist intrinsically. So here we say, so contaminated phenomenon, no, and there's no deficient from, there's no parted from stain, and they're not lacking, and no being deficient and no being additional. The mental defilements and contaminated phenomenon do not it doesn't just happen in a non-interdependent way, but so both the and also the being additional, the growing of the qualities, it lacks intrinsic existence. So everything lacks intrinsic existence, and even their characteristics lack intrinsic existence. they're not produced intrinsically. They don't cease intrinsically. They're not contaminated phenomenon. Don't exist as being contaminated intrinsically, etc. So the elimination of defilements and the development of qualities, it doesn't happen intrinsically. It happens in an interdependent way. And let's take just the first one. Let's take, for example, sound. What are the characteristics of sound? It vibrates. You can hear it. It's impermanent. It has a beginning, it has an end. There's aspects of sound. But each one of these aspects, does it exist in an autonomous way? It's impermanent. Why? Because there's interaction. It's not intrinsically impermanent. So even characteristics exist as such. Fire burns and water wets because all the parts interact in a certain way that bring those characteristics to be. So in this moment, he's talking to the practitioner who, by seeing everything and everyone, one is meditating on the lack of inherent existence of oneself, and in that meditative state, one sees that not only do I lack intrinsic experience, but every phenomenon lacks intrinsic existence. Even the characteristics, pure and phenomenon, non-pure phenomenon, being produced, arising, stopping, etc. This makes reference to when the mind analyzes. The part of the mind that analyzes as well, one is a single-pointed concentration that brings to a non-conceptual meditation. So it says, and here he makes reference to two things: the direct experience of emptiness and the process of repeating this experience. It says, because it's like that, Shariputra, in voidness, there's no form, no feeling, no distinction, no distinction or discernment, no affecting variables, emotions, compositional factors, our personality, and no kind of consciousness, the mind that perceives the senses, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. So in that moment of that non-conceptual experience of emptiness, the mind that realizes the lack of inherent existence, nothing else appears. If I begin to reflect on the lack of inherent existence of the flower, as long as I am on a conceptual process where there's still the flower and its lack of inherent existence, once I go beyond the conceptual level, the only object of perception for the practitioner in meditation is the lack of inherent existence itself. There's no flower, there's nothing else. It's like saying, let's imagine the following. We observe the flower and we start observing how many possibilities are there. There's innumerable, infinite. At a certain point, I try to I see that what appears to me is not the reality, it's one of many, and I try to see among these infinite possibilities, and I lose sight of the flower itself. When I'm able to see the many possibilities. I can't see a specific one. I see the infinitude, which is kind of like a nothing, because I can't grasp and select any of the one of many of the when I try to see the many choices, I can't choose one. When I perceive that the flower or anything else, a body sensation, appears as being of inherent existence, but is not in an autonomous, independent way, I'm not able at the same time to continue perceiving the flower, the body, or the sensation, or whatever the object was. It's like a kind of shock. And the only thing that the meditator can perceive is that it's not. That lack of inherent existence. In that state of meditation, in that state of consciousness, nothing else appears to the mind other than the lack of inherent existence. And in that state, there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sight. There's it. No, no, no. It's not. It's not. We're talking about all the phenomena that are divided into the 6, 12, 18, 6 by 3. All phenomena are divided into 18 categories. What are these 18 categories? The form, these are the senses: form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects. So we have the 6 sensory objects, and then we have the 6 sense powers, or so we have our sight, and our taste, and our touch, our hearing, our seeing, and our mind that perceives mental objects. And then we have the 6 consciousness. We have the consciousness of seeing, of tasting, etc. These are the 18 categories. So when you sometimes some texts talk about the 18 realms, this is the 18, the 3 different categories, because it's said that the experience of reality comes through these 18 realms. So here, when it says no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no physical sensation, no phenomenon. So these are the 5. Those are the 5 aggregates. But where it says no eye, no ear, no nose, but also no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no physical sensation, no phenomenon. These are the mental objects, phenomenon. No cognitive source, that's an eye, or up to no cognitive source, that's a mind. So there you see the 18 realms, the 18 different ways to see phenomenon. What's the essence? What's the meaning here? That in the state of meditation, in non-conceptual, there is nothing other than the lack of intrinsic existence of the object. And in this perception, there's no ignorance, no unawareness, no elimination of unawareness, up to no aging and death, no elimination of aging and death. And this is making reference to the 12 links of interdependence, the description of how the cycle of suffering and samsara works. It starts with ignorance. After ignorance, we have karmic formation, conscious karmic formation. We have name and form, senses, contact, sensation, attachment, all the way up to to death, with the 12 links. And this is the elimination of, is getting out of samsara. And that this makes reference to this. The next one is making reference to the four noble truths, where it says, likewise, no suffering, cause, stopping, and pathway mind. This is the Four Noble Truths, showing us that in the meditative state of emptiness, the non-conceptual experience, there's nothing other than lack of intrinsic existence. And once you have had that experience, and here we're talking about the parasamgate, once you've had that experience, you need to repeat it again and again and apply it to many different objects of meditation. So first, you have a direct experience starting with form, body. You see that your body lacks intrinsic existence, and you stay in that meditative state. Then I repeat that same meditation with sensations, and then with my discernment, then with mental, with the compositional factors, and then consciousness. And then I see that form and sound and smell, the six objects one by one lack intrinsic existence. Then I do the same meditation on all sensory objects, and the various aspects of the cycle of samsara, and the order of samsara, and also the order of getting out of samsara, and also the causes of samsara lack intrinsic existence. Nirvana lacks intrinsic existence, and the path lacks intrinsic existence. The supreme, even the no attainment, the bodhisattvas, etc. Once there's a direct experience, it's just not enough. It needs to be repeated on all of reality again and again, to all different kinds of objects, so that little by little we deconstruct the appearance in a very condensed way. At this point, Avalokitesvara explains to Shariputra the way to realize the correct view of reality. So first, we start with the five aggregates. You see them conceptually. Once you've been able to understand and see, and once you maintain that single-pointed meditation on the five aggregates, on the self as lacking inherent existence, you analyze also that all phenomenon and all the characteristics and such lack intrinsic existence. Once you've had the non-conceptual experience, you need to repeat it, but starting from different phenomenon. It's this process. This is the path of meditation, and the starting object, the objects of meditation, the lack of inherent existence of the various objects of meditation change. Because it's like that, Shariputra. Through there being no attainment, bodhisattvas, he or she lives relying on far-reaching, discriminating awareness with no mental obscuration. Because of there being no mental obscuration, there's no fear gone beyond what's reversed. Thus, nirvana, release, complete to the end. In fact, it's by relying on far-reaching, discriminating awareness that all Buddhas arrayed throughout the three times are full manifest Buddhas in peerless and perfect full Buddhahood. And that is the bodhi, the state of enlightenment, a final path, the path of no more learning. And here Avalokitesvara says, just a minute.
dopo lo riguardiamo ancora.
Then we'll look at it again.
Perciò Shariputra,
So,
poiché non
Shariputra,
cosa vuol dire che
what does it mean when it says, because it's like that Shariputra, through there being no attainment of bodhisattvas, the state of realization, the state of Buddhahood, does it exist inherently? No, it's because the state of Buddhahood doesn't exist. What we want to reach, it doesn't exist intrinsically, but exists interdependently. Because of that, that's why it's possible to reach that state. So because it's like that, Shariputra, through there being no attainment of bodhisattvas, what exists is a graduated path, interdependent, that that allows you to reach that. So the bodhisattvas rely on far-reaching discriminating awareness with no mental obscuration. They start from the wisdom that realizes the lack of intrinsic existence, and they stay there little by little, deconstructing the grasping at the appearance of intrinsic existence, taking away the solid existence on which our mental defilements rest, base themselves.
Tenchin netes tetawena, essendo così Shariputra, ai bodhisattva non c'è un ottenimento autonomo intrinseco, e per questa ragione Shariputra Jimbasamo Dilas, in questa profonda perfezione paramita della saggezza, Tenchin nete si appoggiano.
Because it's like that, Shariputra, through there being no attainment of bodhisattvas, here she lives relying on this far-reaching discrimination of awareness with no mental obscuration, because there's nothing external that I need to reach, but it's a process that I can reach. For this reason, the bodhisattvas, they rely on this far-reaching discriminating awareness. They rely on this wisdom that we've talked about, and that all Buddhas arrayed throughout the 3 times, the full master Buddhas and peerless and perfectful Buddhahood, they rely on and they remain on this wisdom. They remain in this non-conceptual wisdom, little by little, deepening more and more this wisdom. And in this way, their mind becomes free of obstruction and free of all fear, because there being no mental obscuration or obstruction or obscuration. There are 2 different types of obstruction: mental defilements, and also ignorance of grasping at intrinsic existence. And the other obstruction are the imprints of ignorance. So there are no more mental defilements. There are no more imprints of ignorance. So there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. So Shariputra, because of there being no mental obscuration, there's no fear gone beyond what's reversed. Thus, nirvana, release complete to the end. No, so without the mental obscurations, there's no more fear. And because they've gone beyond what's reversed, thus nirvana, release complete to the end. They reach their final Tarcinto means that they reach their final destination. They get to the end. they complete to the end, nirvana. But the fundamental point here, Chinchi lo le shintu dene, completely gone beyond any error. What do they mean? What's reversed? What's the error that we find ourselves into today? Is grasping at intrinsic existence, at the appearance of intrinsic existence. It's grasping at intrinsic existence, and on a deeper level, the appearance of intrinsic existence. And this Chinshin is like reversed. It's gone beyond what's reversed. Shintu means deeply, completely, and then it's and beyond. So we completely, we've gone deeply beyond this erroneous view of grasping at intrinsic existence and the appearance of intrinsic existence. And at that point, having gone beyond, they reach Buddhahood. They go beyond suffering into nirvana. So the Buddhahood, the state of Buddhahood, is described here. It's also called the awakened one. Why is a Buddha called the awakened one? It would be more correct to call him the awakened one, not the reawakened one, the awakened one, because it's based on the analogy that now we're dreaming and we're asleep and we're dreaming and we don't know that we're dreaming. This is an analogy. Here it says the fact is a reality appears to us as being of intrinsic existence. We believe it and we're not even aware of it. We're dreaming and we don't know that it's a dream. At a certain point, we're able to have a moment where we wake up and we start doubting, was it a dream? Is it not a dream? Until we're able to really understand that it's a dream. That's when we realize that things lack intrinsic existence. In the analogy, I keep dreaming, but I am aware that it's a dream. I still have the appearance, but I know that it's not like that. When I'm able to go beyond also the appearance, then I'm awake. I am not seeing the dream, but waking up from a dream makes reference to the appearance of intrinsic existence. So when we talk about a Buddha as being the awakened one, awakened from the dream of the appearance of intrinsic existence. So we go beyond this appearance and so beyond any form of suffering, so-called nirvana. So gone beyond what's reserved, completely reserved. This means the ignorance and the imprints of ignorance. Every error, they complete to the end. And it's by relying on far-reaching discriminating awareness. In fact, it's by relying on wisdom, far-reaching discriminating awareness, that all Buddhas arrayed throughout the 3 times are full manifest Buddhas in peerless and perfect full Buddhahood, are awakened. All the Buddhas of the past who reached Buddhahood in the past, those who are reaching Buddhahood in the present, and those who will reach Buddhahood in the future, the 3 times, they reach Buddhahood. How? By relying on wisdom, far-reaching, discriminating awareness. This goes beyond the concept of Buddhist. Any being to get out of 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 the cycle of suffering, the only way to reach this state of perfect nirvana is by perfecting wisdom. So all Buddhas of the three times have reached, are reaching, and will reach the full Buddhahood um, by perfecting wisdom. And they're completely awakened by relying on the far-reaching discriminating awareness. Because it's like that, the far-reaching discriminating awareness is the great mind-protecting mantra, the mind-protecting mantra of great knowledge, the mind-protecting mantra that's unsurpassed, the mind-protecting mantra equal to the unequaled, the mind-protected mantra completely stilling and suffering. Because it's being non-deceitful, it's known as the truth in far-reaching discriminating awareness. The mind-protecting mantra has been proclaimed, Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Soha, the actual nature gone, gone, gone beyond, gone far beyond, purified state, so be it. O Shariputra, a bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva needs to train like that for behavior that's in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness. So Avalokitesvara concludes, Shariputra, who had asked, he who wants to get out of suffering, how can you rely on wisdom? You should do like this.
Teda shirake paradu jimba samula labra chao tene chumne de tinge zindele shende chunde sema sema chema bab chebe cherese wanjula lexo she jawa chine lexo rigi putete shino rigi putete shinte jetar kyogi temba te shin to shirake paradu jimba samula chebra chade de shin shebanam kya jesu irango chumden de gidike che ka tene tene ma shirata de budan sema sema chema bab cherese wanjula tamjida be korda da hadami da lama reza chebe jignena de chumden de gi sumbala ngombar do
Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha, the actual nature. It's like this, gone, gone, gone beyond, gone far beyond, purified state, so be it, or awakened state, so be it. O Shariputra, a bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva needs to train like that for behavior that's in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness. Then the vanquishing master, suppressing all, arising from that absorbed concentration, gave endorsement, excellent, to the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Avalokitesvara. Excellent, excellent, my spiritual son with the family traits. It's just like that. It's just like that he or she needs to conduct his or her behavior in a profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness. It's exactly has been shown by you for the Bodhisattvas, Arhats, and Bodhas to rejoice. And he says to Avalokitesvara, what you said is exactly like that. I agree that you should do exactly like that. When the vanquishing master, suppressing all, had pronounced those words, the venerable son of Sharadati, the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Avalokitesvara, and the pair of assemblies of those endowed with awe, as well as the world, gods, humans, anti-gods, and the Gandhavara, heavenly musicians, rejoicing, sang praises of what had been declared by the vanquishing master, suppressing all. Everyone who was present and heard rejoiced fully for what had been said. Tomorrow we'll go back to the mantra and the meaning of other things. For me, it's quite touching, the fact that today, in 2024 in Italy, we can access, read, understand, get close to, feel something that has been handed down for generations, and even if we can't realize it right away, when we can at least taste the essence of the teachings of Buddha and his path. This is already so much. So I'd like to conclude by reading the sutra so that we can we so that we can feel more touch. You imagine yourselves being there. These words have I heard. At one time, the vanquishing, it's like telling a story. Like these words, when you hear a story, you imagine it. So imagine this moment. These words have I heard. At one time, the vanquishing master, surpassing all, was dwelling at the Vulture's Peak Mountain by the royal city of Rajgayira, together with the great assembly of monastic Sangha and the great assembly of the Bodhisattva Sangha. At that time, the vanquishing master, surpassing all, was totally absorbed in the absorbed concentration that expresses the multiplicity of phenomena known as the appearance of the profound. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Avalokitesvara, the powerful Lord, beholding all around, conducting his behavior in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness, was beholding all around in detail like this. He was beholding all around in detail the 5 aggregate factors of his experience, and even those as devoid of self-establishing nature. Then, through the might of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra addressed these words to the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, in the Arya Avalokitesvara. How does any spiritual child with the Buddha family traits need to train who wishes to conduct his or her behavior in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness? Addressed like that, the Bodhisattva, the great-minded Mahasattva, the Arya Avalokitesvara, addressed these words to the venerable son of Sharavtati. O Shariputra, any spiritual son with the family traits of the or spiritual daughter with the family traits who wishes to conduct his or her behavior in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness needs to behold all around in detail like this. He or she needs to keep in view fully and in detail the 5 aggregate factors of his or her experience and those as devoid of self-establishing nature. Form, voidness, voidness, form. Form not separate from voidness, voidness not separate from form. What has form, that has voidness. What has voidness, that has form. Similarly, feeling, discernment, affecting variables, types of consciousness, voidness. It's like that, Shariputra, with all phenomenon, voidness. No defining characteristics, no arising, no stopping, no being stained, no being parted from stain, no being deficient, no being additional. Because it's like that, Shariputra, in voidness, there's no form, no feeling, no distinction, no affecting variables, no kind of consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no physical sensation, no phenomenon. Not even no cognitive source, that's an I, up to no cognitive source, that's a mind. No cognitive source, that's phenomenon. No cognitive source, that's mental consciousness. There's no unawareness, no elimination of unawareness, up to no aging and death, no elimination of aging and death. Likewise, there's no suffering, cause, stopping, and pathway, mind. No deep awareness, no attainment, no non-attainment. Because it's like that, Shariputra, through there being no attainment of bodhisattvas, he or she lives relying on far-reaching discriminating awareness with no mental obscuration. Because there being no mental obscuration, there is no fear. Gone beyond what's reversed, thus nirvana, release, complete to the end. In fact, it's by relying on far-reaching discriminating awareness that all Buddhas arrayed throughout the 3 times are full manifest Buddhas in peerless and perfect full Buddhahood. Because it's like that, far-reaching discrimination as awareness is the great mind-protecting mantra, the mind-protecting mantra of great knowledge, the mind-protecting mantra that's unsurpassed, the mind-protecting mantra equal to the unequaled, the mind-protecting mantra completely stilling all suffering because of its being non-deceitful. It's to be known as the truth. in far-reaching discriminating awareness, the mind-protecting mantra has been proclaimed. Tayata, gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi soha. It's like this, the actual nature, gone, gone, gone beyond, gone far beyond, purified state. So be it. O Shariputra, a bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, needs to train like that for behavior that's in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness. Then the vanquishing master, suppressing all, arising from that absorbed concentration, gave his endorsement, excellent, to the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Arya Avalokitesvara, excellent, excellent, my spiritual son with the family traits. It's just like that. It's just like that, that he or she needs to conduct his or her behavior in profound and far-reaching discriminating awareness. It's exactly as been shown by you for the Bodhisattvas, Arhats, and Buddhas to rejoice. When the vanquishing master, surpassing all, had pronounced those words, the venerable son of Sharavdati, the Bodhisattva, great-minded Mahasattva, the Arya Avalokitesvara, and the pair of assemblies of those endowed with awe, as well as the world, gods, humans, anti-gods, Gandhara, heavenly musicians rejoicing, sang praises of what had been declared by the vanquishing master, surpassing all.
Sashi peke chushi medo tran rirab lingshe nide gembadi sange shindu mikte ulwargi drogu namda shingla chup jetsun lame kutse rabtenchi nam karatinle chokchurge padan losan tempe drume sasumge drowe munsela tatu ne gyur Chi yedam guru ratna mendrala kam niryata yami nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin ninsen takto delekpe kuncho sumki chingi lob kuncho sumki ngodrubutsol kuncho sumki tashishu.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Kyamne kuncho sumla che pabulo cho sambo pagyo treshi patu che tempe tinle yarmoda pegyo trolo zambe zebra che panden lame shela che pabu.
Have a good lunch. Thank you very much.